Hello and welcome to the Matt and Kendal Hagee podcast. Today, Kendal and I are continuing in our mini-series of what she calls advice to our younger selves. And while I would be glad to provide advice to my younger self, I'd really like to extend this advice to all of our listeners, to their, children, their teenagers, and give them the opportunity to hopefully glean from some of our experiences. So, we talked in our first episode about relationships, and we talked in the second episode in this mini-series about career and work, and all of those things are really kind of connected into our topic for today, which is money management, finances. And people believe that, money isn't the most important thing. And I certainly agree with that. Money is not the most important thing. But if it's not the most important thing, then why is everybody always worried about it?
Yes.
It doesn't really matter. In any area of life, when you talk about opportunity, people immediately ask this question: what does it cost? Would you like to go to dinner? Well, what type of restaurant are we going to? How much is it per plate? Would you like to go on this vacation? Would you like to take this job? Whatever it is.
What is my salary?
Everything that we do in this life is connected to some form of a monetary value, and that monetary value is something that everyone is concerned about. And so if we were going to offer advice to our younger selves about finances, Kendal, I know from obviously years of relationship and knowing your personal story and history.
Celebrating 16 years this month.
Just in a couple of days. Or, in that situation, you started working at an early age. You
Yes.
started babysitting.
Yes, I started babysitting when I was 14 years old.
Started babysitting, and before you started babysitting, what did you do?
Before I started babysitting?
Yeah, didn't you have to get certified with CPR or something?
Oh, no. So when you started babysitting at 14, I was just babysitting for my neighbor. And then I became a waitress at 16. I was waitressing in a little Lidl at this little tiny restaurant. Had to be there at 5:30 in the morning to serve coffee. I'm thinking about my Hannah now. She's 14. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to get her something.
And you know what?
Babysitting's a great job.
But whenever you went to work, it didn't kill you.
No, it was good.
But the thing that it really did was
taught me responsibility.
It taught you what it takes to earn money.
Yes.
And I think that is the first lesson of finances, is understand how much effort and energy is required in order to generate income. One of the things that gets to be a real problem these days is that your 5-year-old walks up to his grandpa and goes, "Can I have $1? Can I have $1?" And it sounds simple. It's a 4-quarter exchange. Yeah, here's $1, son. And that's great for grandpas and grandkids. But it gets to be a problem when your 25-year-old walks up and goes, "Hey, Dad, can I have 100? And at which point you go, "Why aren't you making your own 100? And therein lies what we have in many ways neglected in a younger generation, is teaching them what it takes to earn income. Pastor Hagee, my dad, he started picking cotton when he was 8. And if I've heard one cotton picking story, I've heard them all. And I started unloading fruit trucks with my grandfather when I was 12. And there's a lot of people that think that that's just unheard of. How could your father send you off to do that? Well, let me tell you something. It was difficult work because you had to be on the dock at 3:30 in the morning. And, when a 40-foot onion truck shows up with 40,000 pounds of onions in it, it's all day. Especially when you're 12,
rotten
and you smell like onions when it's over. It's not pretty, but whenever I had got my first paycheck, and I didn't know it then, but I know it now. I was underage, and so my dad and my grandfather had worked out a deal about how much I was going to get paid, and it was less than minimum wage and all this other stuff. But when I got my first paycheck, after 2 weeks of unloading trucks, it was $149.11.
You remember the exact
Oh, my
amount.
goodness. $149.11 when you're 12 years old after 10 days of work. It was a fortune.
Yes.
And so when my kids walk up to me and they're like, "Dad, can I have $20?" I'm like, "Excuse me?"
Yeah, what is that gonna...
Where's your onions? And
what are you going to do?
But it's something that's important to put into context, because if you do not allow them to appreciate what it takes to generate it, they'll always take it for granted. I believe that's one of the reasons why we have a generation that easily puts down credit cards. They don't think
That's
about
right.
$1,000 purchase on a credit card because they never had to generate the $1,000 that it takes to pay off that credit card. And then it compounds, and there's a lot of financial
adding
matrix
up.
that work through that. So, I mean, one of the things that I would give as advice to my younger self or to anybody who's listening is learn early what it takes to generate income. And the only way you can do that is with a work ethic. And then the thing that I would do is I would learn how to manage the money that you make. Because there are certain people who can make a lot of money. They have natural talents. They have all kinds of abilities. You've seen them in professional sports. They get millions of dollars for playing,
Yes.
in the athletic arena that they're in, but they do not know how to manage their money. I'll never forget listening to an interview one time as the NBA was going on strike. And one of the marquee players, if I gave you his name, you'd certainly remember him, but one of the marquee players in the league was doing a press conference, and he made the claim that the reason it was imperative for the strike to end is that he had 4 Ferraris and he had payments due on 4 Ferraris. And I remember thinking to myself, pardon the statement if somebody finds this offensive. I said, okay, so you got 4 Ferraris, you only got 1 rear end. How many can it sit in? And with that being the case, he had not learned how to manage money. He had excess, but he had no control of himself. And I think it doesn't matter how much you make. If you make $1 million or you make $10, if you don't know how to manage money, you'll lose it. If you know how to manage it, you can use it to produce more.
That's right. Something that we're doing with our kids is they each have their little safe. They have
They
their
have a
own little
safe.
code, and they're putting in money, but we start at like 3 different,
Correct.
save, spend, give.
And so, when I got my first $149.11, Dad
Yeah,
looked
what
at me
was-
and he said, well, 10% of that is $14.09. And, I said, well, can I round down? And he said, nope, 10% is 10%. So he said, why don't you round it up? And I gave the Lord in my first check $15, and I don't say that to say, oh, I've been a tither from the beginning. I say that to say that even when I was resistant to it, I didn't give my $15 check to the church with joy. I gave my $15 check to the church thinking, do you know how many onions I unloaded to get that money?
Yes.
$5 an hour, $15 was 3 hours worth of work. But what I did was I learned how to manage money. And the first thing you do is you give to God
First
what
fruit.
He requires. It's what He requires. It's not what He asks you to think about. I know that there's a lot of places in the world today where they don't teach on tithing. But God didn't tell you to believe that, you might want to pray about, thinking about, considering the idea that you should give. It's the actual place in Scripture where He challenges us to try Him. He actually calls us out. He says, I dare you. Malachi 3, he says, try me now in this and see if I will not open the windows of heaven and pour out on you blessings you cannot contain. God is literally daring us to give. And so the first thing that my dad taught me in managing money was to give. And then from there, you spend responsibly. And one of the things that I recommend to a lot of young people who are going off to college, no matter what their interests are, if it's medicine, if it's music, whatever it happens to be, I tell them you need to take some business courses so that you'll learn how to manage money. And the reason for that, how many medical doctors did you work with in your nursing, years that because of their brilliance in the operating room or because of their abilities in the medical field, they generated volumes of money, but were always struggling because they financially didn't know how to manage it.
Yeah.
They actually gave the money to people in order for those people to manage it for them. Well, I'll have to ask my money manager, or I'll have to ask my banker, or I'll have to ask somebody else because while I know how to do brain surgery, I don't know how to go manage the money that I put into the bank account. And the point of that is no matter what you do, if you throw a baseball, if you work on spaceships, if you clean houses, everyone gets paid in money. And so you need to learn how to manage it. And, my perspective on money is this. It's a tool.
It is, yes.
A child sitting on the beach with a bucket and a shovel has a tool that they can move sand with. A construction company with 4 bulldozers has tools they can build hotels with. The child with the beach and the bucket and the shovel can build a sandcastle.
That's right.
The construction company with bulldozers, they can build an entire resort. And so if you look at money as a tool, you'll recognize that the bigger the tool you have, the more you can do with it. And I think that people should utilize resources as a tool. Use it for good.
Yeah.
Find something to invest in that's making a difference in the community and give to it.
Yeah.
Why? Because God will bless you in your giving.
Say, give
and the Bible says, whoever is trusted with a little and proves faithful, they'll be given much. So if God can discover that in you, you're someone who will move the tool of funds through your hands into other places of blessing, God says, I'm just going to open up the tap because you're somebody that I can trust. It's whenever you hoard it that God says,
I was going to say, because money doesn't make you happy. I've heard you, you preach that, your dad preached that, just because you have a lot of money, sometimes those are the most lonely people, that have money. But when you give it and share with others and give it to the Lord and you manage it, then
I think this is something that,
it is a tool.
that I can share in transparency here on our podcast,
I want to
because
hear it.
it's just you and I, and
I know nobody else is listening.
No one else is here.
I'm
There's other people
nervous
listening,
right now.
but no one else is here.
What are you going to say?
I am a lot less emotional about money than you are.
That's true. That's true.
If you said any different, I'd say I'm going to have to agree
I started
to disagree.
doing a checkbook when I was 14 and had to write out every penny.
Here's the thing: when you say money won't make you happy,
Well, I'm just saying money doesn't always make you happy.
No, it doesn't.
Yes.
But there are people who are listening that, right now they're struggling. They're delivering pizzas and they're paying student loans and they're wondering, when am I going to get, to a financial place of satisfaction? You need to understand that your finances and your satisfaction do not go together.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So that's what
satisfaction
we're agreeing on.
is something that you make up your mind. I am going to be happy. The
'cause
Bible says, no matter what state I'm in, there I will be content.
Rejoice. Yes.
I'm going to be content. Godliness with contentment is great gain. And so when somebody says, as soon as I make, and then fill in the blank, for some people it'll be $10,000. For other people it'll be $100,000. For other people it'll be $1 million, $10 million, whatever it is. As soon as I make this amount of money, I'll be happy. And if that's the indicator of your happiness, whenever you arrive at the mark, the guy who decides 10,000 is sufficient, he'll be happy for about an hour, and then he wants 20, and then he wants 200, and then he wants 2 million, and he just keeps going and going and going and going and going. The individual who connects their satisfaction with their day, with the relationships that they have in the day, if money goes up or money goes down, they're never going to lose the sense of joy that they have in this life, because they recognize where life comes from. Life does not come from an ATM machine. Life comes from the God who gave it to you. That's right. And I can say this, that when people are less emotional about money, they make better decisions with it.
That's true.
There are times when you and I have had arguments.
I think every married couple talks about finances.
Okay,
I mean, it's the number one thing that some couples, they argue about all the time. Why are you spending that on? Or how many, what are you?
That's silly stuff.
I know it is, but it is a
here's one
conversation.
argument that we had. When we got married, you had student loans for college, and you had a car payment.
Yes.
And as soon as I got all of our finances of our married life put together, I went to you and I said, I'm going to cut one check and pay off your car loan. And you went nuts. and the reason you went nuts is because in your context, spending the small amount on the payment was a lot better than spending the large amount on getting rid of the debt.
I agree.
And then once I explained how this interest thing worked and told you that if we keep making that payment, we're going to give the company that was financing it twice as much as the car was worth, and I could show it to you on a piece of paper, immediately you said, well, then we should do it. And then as soon as we got rid of the car payment, we were able to get rid of the student loan payment. And then we started putting money in the bank that helped us get our first house and helped us get all of these things that enabled us to provide the life that we have for our 4 kids. But the difference was your degree, your education, your training was in science and medicine and nursing.
Yes.
Mine was in business finance. And so I saw money as a tool. And what I was saying was, let's get rid of the small shovel and get a bigger shovel. And then let's turn a shovel into a scoop, and let's turn a scoop into a tractor, and let's turn a tractor into a construction company that can build something we want to keep. And whenever you see it as a tool, you rejoice in the fact that you are using the tool.
That's right.
Because, a carpenter's only happy when the hammer's swinging, right?
Yes.
But when you don't see it as a tool, when you see it as a resource, when you see it as, something that sustains life, you get very connected to how much of my life am I losing if I cut that check? What
right.
if? What if I need it tomorrow?
Yes.
What if
there's an
what if there's an
emergency
emergency
that you had
and
medical-
all
Yes.
these things, and you're sitting there looking at it, from a perspective that money sustains life, and it doesn't. It enables life to be lived at a certain speed and in a certain volume, but it doesn't enable your life. Your life is enabled by your heartbeat. Your heartbeat was created by God, and it let everything that hath breath.
Praise the Lord.
So, advice to your younger self, learn what it takes to earn it, learn how to use it, and learn what to do with it so that it can enable your life to be lived to its fullest. Kendall and I want to thank you for joining us on this
Yes,
podcast.
thanks,
We hope
guys.
that you learned something today about personal finances and money management. And if you have any questions, don't be afraid to post them on our social media platforms. Ask us directly, or recommend that somebody who's maybe up to their eyeballs in debt pick up the podcast, subscribe it on their platform, and be able to learn something that they might not have heard before our conversation today. Our purpose in this podcast is to make sure that it makes an everyday difference in your life. So if there's a way that we can do that better, please let us know. Kendall, tell them
and
what
we
platforms they
want
can find us
you
on.
to stay tuned for next week for the final fourth episode for the miniseries. We're going to talk about purpose. So stay tuned, invite a friend. Love to hear from you. Subscribe and find us on Apple or Spotify. Talk to y'all later.